All right. Good morning, Doug. We're back with some viewer Q&A. First of all, if you are a viewer and do have questions that you'd like to ask Doug, I would encourage you to join our Telegram group. The link for that is in the description below. Join the Telegram group. I solicit questions there, and we get through as many of them as we can when typically on Fridays. So, Doug, first of all, first question. Somebody says, there's plenty of major trends in the world that are dystopian as hell. Increased censorship, propaganda, totalitarianism, looming financial crisis, food shortages, war, inflation, vaccine passports, etc. But can you see any trends that are heading in the right direction? Something that makes them feel a bit of optimism about the future?
Well, first, speaking to those trends you mentioned, and there are many other bad trends, I find that trends in motion tend to stay in motion until they reach a climax, a crisis, which anything can happen. But history seems to show that the next thing to happen is not good either. But I don't want to be too gloom and doomy. So what are the good trends? Um, well, frankly, I always go back to what I think are the two biggest and most important trends, and that is that people are wired to produce more than they consume because we're wired a little bit like squirrels. We know in the back of our chimpanzee minds that if we don't put away some nuts for the winter, we're going to starve to death, because that's been the case for the last couple of million years of human history. So that'll continue, even though these stupid governments make that harder and harder and less efficient by destroying your seed capital in the various ways that they do it. So that's the big trend. It's genetically imbued in most people. It's too bad that we go out of our way to keep the people that don't have this in their mind, keep them alive somehow.
Yeah.
I think it'd be better for everybody concerned if they just, died, frankly. So that's one trend. And the other trend is technology does keep advancing. Although I am concerned that the day of Thomas Edison, or for that matter, Leonardo da Vinci, individuals working in their garage or their workshops or whatever, I wonder if that's not going away as more people live in apartments and work for big companies where entrepreneurial enterprise is not valued or cultivated as much, because that's what's really driven technology over the last 500 years. I just wonder if these giant scientific consortiums, some, of course, you need some things like, Hubble and then James Webb, the space telescopes. Can't do that out of your garage. And, massive scientific projects. Okay, I understand that. But I wonder if that's not kind of diminishing a little bit. It's becoming bureaucratized.
Well, I think the reason for that fundamentally is because we are an institutionalized people in a number of different ways. From education through corporate work and things like that. And I just wonder, one of the trends that I see that's really positive is that there is a very serious trend toward homeschooling at this point, toward pulling your kids out of the school system. Having seen what's actually happening there, it's becoming what was an oddity 20 years ago, a complete oddity. You'd think almost badly immediately of a parent who were homeschooling. And now among all of my friends, when you hear about someone homeschooling, you actually think, oh, good, they're awake, they're doing the right thing. So it's like it's completely been flipped on its head. And I think that's a huge and very positive trend and could lead potentially to more of that entrepreneurial and scientific innovation that we would once see in garages, because they aren't so institutionalized in their thinking.
Well, I think you're quite correct. But the only danger is that now that trend has become major, noticeable, the bad guys, the criminals that run things are going to say, oh, can't have this.
That's illegal now, yeah.
Yeah, bad ideas. White terrorism is being
exactly.
cultivated in the society and so forth. So maybe there's another good trend. It's that it kind of came out of nowhere that people often used to refer to themselves as libertarians with a small l, but now there's a very informal movement, but it's real. ANCAPs, capital A, capital C. And it's very serious, I think, because once somebody identifies as an ANCAP, they've really crossed the Rubicon. And
Right.
it seems that the meme is growing
Yeah.
very rapidly. So that's a favorable movement too.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the other part of that, I think, is what I've seen and experienced myself is that the all of the serious emperor has no clothes moments of the last few years, although you could really say of probably the last 20 years, but certainly of the last few years, have really made people more question everything about the way things are being done, including the way that we would individually orient our lives. You know, the things that we would set up as goals and aspirations for ourselves. A lot of times, you know, almost mindlessly, going through some career corporate ladder, pursuit. Prioritizing very simple two-dimensional things like career and financial achievement, maybe over all of the things. And I think a lot of people are going, "What the hell am I doing this for? Like, I'm not getting ahead. You're just going to print more money anyway. Like, you're just like, why am I going and why am I trading my life for these things that don't actually have that much meaning for me?" And there's this whole trend of people, kind of walking away, from their jobs, and everyone goes, "That's a bad thing." And it's a strange thing, but I think the instinct of doing it is a recognition that the systems are not set up to their advantage. They're set up to abuse them, to basically take advantage of their, just to lock them in a system and extract as much as possible from them. And I think that people are going, maybe I don't want to participate in that now. And I find that is to be a very, very positive trend. Hopefully that continues.
That's a very good point, actually, because it seems to me that we're now facing a major turning point in history. Similar to what happened in World War II, where before the war, after the war, society changed. World War I, before, after, society changed all over the world. And this happened a number of times. And of course, the biggest one ever was the Renaissance, followed by the Industrial Revolution. I think what's going on now kind of seems on the same scale as these other things. Doesn't mean we're going to win, though, because the bad guys have kind of consolidated and unified as well. So
Yeah.
this is serious. I just hope we win. Hope it doesn't get
Yeah.
too bloody.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't know how it's going to go. I'm actually reading this book right now called it's called Global Crisis, and basically it's looking at the 17th century and all of the general chaos that was happening all over the world, wars and revolutions, all over the world. And and they also talk about during that same time period was during what was referred to as the mini ice age. During that time period, and they talk about all the climactic events, and and as to provide some tapestry for how kind of connected some of it is. And you just see the great unsettling. I think they referred to that whole. He said that historians in that period referred to that period as a general crisis. It was a general crisis globally everywhere, and it was difficult to even imagine. They writes contemporary people writing at the time were talking about, well, normally we'd have maybe this issue in England, but we wouldn't have this thing happening and elsewhere. But right now it's happening everywhere at the same time, it seems. And it feels like I don't know if that's the best frame of reference for what we're going through now, but there's something like some great unsettling where at the end of it all, everything is going to be different. Hopefully better, but it's certainly going to be different.
Yes, well, we can look down in the street and see the spirit of the century. I hope he's wearing a smiley face.
I hope so too. All right, Doug. Speaking of that, well, next question is, what keeps you up at night?
Well, what keeps me up at night? Actually, nothing. And it's not that these major problems that we've been talking about aren't real, and they're not going to have a personal effect on all of us. But if you've insulated yourself, A, with enough capital, and B, with the right geography, you could be relatively apart from those things. So I don't let them bother you. What's that old saying? Let me know the things that I can change and the things that I can't change.
Yeah,
Let me know the difference.
yeah, it's some prayer. So yeah, give me
Yeah,
the
cute little
yeah,
aphorism. It's true. So I think the answer to the question, what keeps me up at night within that context, it's that essentially nothing, because I try to increasingly think in terms of doing the right thing, maintaining my ethics. And if your ethics are clean and clear, you'll sleep well at night, even if you're hungry.
yep. Well, Marcus Aurelius says, a clear, conscious, and clean living, I think, is what he always says should be the aspiration.
Yeah, and
Clear, so.
he was absolutely right. It's it's one of the great mysteries of history, though. Talking about Marcus Aurelius, is that
It went bad.
so how did Commodus, guy, somebody thoughtful, still makes these gigantic mistakes. So
No idea. Let's see. Okay, next question. Doug, I've been to around 90 countries, and exploring the cuisine of a country was always an important part of my trips. What's your favorite cuisine and dish in the world?
hmm. Well, I think it was Zhou Enlai. Uh, some people say it was Mao, but Mao wasn't sophisticated. He was kind of a thuggish peasant. But de Gaulle was saying, well, in France, we have the best food in the world. We have the haute cuisine. And and Joe, I think it was Joe, said, well, there are 5 great cuisines in the world, and it's true. One of them may be French, and the others he was referring to were Cantonese,
They're all Chinese of some
Sichuan,
kind.
Mandarin, right? Chinese cuisines. So I'm a huge fan of good Chinese cooking. It's fantastic. But you know, generally speaking, the most interesting foods in the world come from Oriental places. Like I love Indian curry dishes, various ones. Love all the Chinese. The Vietnamese have great food. Uh,
Thai food.
well, for instance, I like dumplings, and almost every culture in the world has dumplings of one type or another, and they're simple peasant food, but they're excellent. Everybody has those. What else? Well, Japanese food, elegant, light, pleasant, beautiful, and of course sushi. Everybody likes sushi. I mean, that's
Yeah.
so. What is my favorite cuisine? Well, if I had to choose something from just one country, it would be in the Orient. But in Europe, I wouldn't choose French. I'd choose things that come out of northern Italy. And if I had to live in just one country from a cuisine point of view, I'd choose Switzerland, because it's the richest country, and you got French, Italian, German, and international things. It's a very sophisticated place. That would be the place to live. Who would probably not think in Europe. I don't know. What do you think? Do you have any particular favorites?
Yeah, I'm not, I'm not much of a foodie, but I'm not much of a foodie, but I do like all Asian food. I basically, not all Asian food, but I like a lot. I'd say Asian food I'm drawn to a lot. I like Vietnamese food a lot. I definitely like Thai food a lot. I agree with you on curry dishes. I think they're fantastic. So,
Yeah.
but I'm an easy person to please on with food.
Thai is wonderful. I totally agree. But I'm not a foodie either. I'm very simple with just my bowl of raw oats for breakfast every morning.
Exactly.
Frankly, if I had to eat that, 3 times a day,
If that was it, you'd be okay
I
with it.
could do it. So
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Okay. Let's see. Do you believe this administration, I assume he means the Biden administration, is going to allow elections to take place? He says, I'm getting the feeling that they are setting up so much chaos that they will try to have us under some form of martial law.
That's a good question, because I've said many times, these people really are Jacobins. Same political philosophy, same psychological makeup. These are crazy, evil people. And not just Joe, he's just an old senile guy with bad ethics, and forget about him. And that cackling hyena, I mean, I don't know what she even did to get there. Well, other than
I've heard.
William Brown, and but it shows how degraded the political system is, where you can get people like this actually in office. But as far as I can tell, all of these people in office have really, they're evil intent, bad ethics, wrong beliefs. So, and they'll want to stay in power because they think we're the bad guys. They really do.
This is
So, yeah, will they try to pull off some stunt? I think the most likely thing is that maybe monkeypox now. Do you see that this may be the
I love
COVID
the
2.0?
the hype engine is ramping up about it. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. So if things really get serious, I mean, especially this World Health thing,
Yeah.
this is ultra super dangerous. This is a big deal. It'll, this is their path to world domination. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I gotta believe this summer is going to be chaotic and ugly in the Northern Hemisphere anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. What are your thoughts? Yeah, martial law is possible. I think, the thing about martial law is it's such an overt power grab, and it seems like they've been getting away with so much without ever having to go that overt direction. By having lockdowns, and they get a mail-in balloting. Last time, they could get away with that by causing chaos with, BLM or whatever, dividing people between pro-life and pro-choice, like those kinds of tools, those wedge tools, and then a little bit of dickering with the polls. I think they might not have to go all martial law to make it happen, but I wouldn't put it past them, I guess, if they had to.
Yeah, almost anything's possible.
Okay, Doug, what are your thoughts on all the biohacking that billionaires are doing in their ambition to extend, their life, to basically trying to stay alive forever? Stem cells, all the different things that they have going on. What are your thoughts on the billionaires spending their effort to do that?
Oh, I think it's wonderful and it's productive. I mean, because look, if it wasn't for advancements in technology and economics, we'd all basically be dead by the time we were 25 or 30, okay? Now we get to live to be 75 or 80 or something like that now, okay? So I think it'd be better if we all got to live to 100 or 200 or 300, because as you get older, you learn more things. And actually, unless you're basically evil, and there are people like that, you do become mellower and more wise and more productive and so forth. So I think it's absolutely wonderful. That's what being a billionaire is for. So you have the capital, so you can do that type of thing. But I'm sure the government is going to get involved on some way. There's so many ways they can fuck this up, and they will.
Yeah, it's true.
So I got to emphasize that the state is your enemy here. The billionaires aren't your enemy. The state is your enemy.
Right. But the state would like you to think that the billionaires are the problem, or that the other race down the street is the problem, or, the people who do think differently than you are the problem. That's their game.
That's right. Incidentally, so I don't forget, I'll mention this now, especially relatively early in this, is that, my wife is very smart and she reads a whole lot and she thinks about things. And she came up with something today that kind of relates to this, that I got to mention. It's that throughout society, especially, it's like a meme, especially in Christian societies, you want to be a good shepherd, okay? Because there are dangerous wolves out there. Well, that's a really stupid meme. You want to know why? Because, yeah, the wolf is a danger, but you know he's out there and you can guard against him. It's the shepherd that's your enemy. He's the one that's going to take you to the slaughterhouse. And in the meantime, is shearing you and taking your lambs to eat and all this type of thing. So this meme of the shepherd will guard us, and everybody sees the state as being their shepherd. I mean, it is totally upside down, and it's so ingrained that people never even question it. And I never even thought, well, wait a minute, that's absolutely right. It's right in front of you, but you never think of it because it's like part of your conscience. Oh, good shepherd. Oh yeah, he's guarding the sheep. No, he's not. He's the bad guy.
Right. That's amazing. Actually, I never thought about that either. But that is deeply rooted in my and like the meme. Immediately, I think of that as the helper, the protector, the shepherd.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like that movie about that sniper in Iraq, the one that killed 100 people and all that, and he saw himself as being in the movie
a sheepdog.
I'm like a shepherd.
Yeah, sheepdog.
You're really just and I admire your skills, all for your skills, no problem there. But he was basically a psychopath, and he saw himself as a shepherd. So there was something that maybe he was putting two and two together. Who knows?
Yeah. All right, Doug, how do you define financial independence?
Not having to work, I think, is one thing, and being in a position to, within reason, do anything that you want to do when you want to do it. I'd say that's what it is. But, a very old friend of mine, Bo the Hobo, Bo Keeley is his actual name. I don't know how much money, if any, Bo has, but he lives in Slab City in the Mojave Desert. And he doesn't have any money, doesn't need any money. Seems as happy as absolutely anybody. Certainly got many more experiences than almost anybody. I mean, he's really full of experiences. So how much money do you need? Bo doesn't need any. And some people just got to have more and more and more. So,
but I wonder if those people who got to have more and more and more are ever actually financially independent because of that. As soon as you feel like I got to go get money so that I can be free, you're clearly not free, right? You're not financially independent.
No, you're not. You've linked yourself to possessions outside of yourself, which is a stupid error. So, listen, nobody wants to sleep under a bridge and grub for roots and berries, which a lot of people will be doing in the years to come. So it's better to be financially independent. And I just define it the way I did. What does that mean in dollars today? Well, it can be from zero in Bo's case to, just pick a scale. So
yeah. Right. But the thing is, you don't have to necessarily wait until we don't have to necessarily wait until you have $10 million before you can think of yourself as financially independent. In fact, a lot of people who I know who have achieved outcomes like that aren't really financially independent at all. Their life is full of daily obligations and they weigh heavily on them, so
all that money has made them perversely more dependent. It's like my first commodity broker, Charlie, once observed. He said, "The bag is never full enough."
Yes, that's true. That's true. All right, Doug, someone asked a personal question here. Don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but someone asked if you could share something about your mother or father that had an impact on the person that you are today.
Well, I figured out, they had an interesting background. He was appointed. He was a good buddy. My father was a good buddy of Roosevelt, actually, and a huge supporter of Roosevelt and donor and all the rest of this type of thing. So, and he was a very patriotic, jingoistic kind of guy, kind of a cross physically and psychologically between John Wayne and Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's quite a mashup. Yeah,
he hit her Johnson, incidentally, for what it's worth. But so anyway, this is World War II, and he's lieutenant commander on a Navy ship. I forget the name of it. So anyway, One time when he gets back, my mother was a stewardess on United Airlines, back when you had to be young and pretty and an RN and have a spirit of adventure. That was considered very adventurous in those days. So on the surface of it, the two of them would seem to have been a great match, but it was a marriage made in hell. So it just goes to show. Anyway, they were both okay. I mean, they were both fine. They just shouldn't have mated. But then again, I don't know where I would be if they hadn't mated. And would I, let's go sci-fi. Perhaps I was a spiritual entity and I chose, this body being born because it seemed like a good idea at the time instead of choosing another. Who the hell knows?
That's worked out okay. It's worked out okay. You seem like you may have been right.
I really got no complaints. We all have complaints, but so this is terra incognita. Who the hell knows? Anyway, they were fine. Both had their problems, but who doesn't? So no dramas. No dramas.
No dramas. Okay. Do you think the global elite want World War III? And if so, do you think that's is it? Well, he says, do they want World War III to reduce the population?
We're dealing with criminal psychopaths, as far as I'm concerned. All these people that manage to get to the very top ranks of a criminal organization, which is the state, everywhere. There's something really dangerous and wrong with them, especially when we're talking about these major powers. It's like a snake pit. Only the biggest and most venomous snake rises to the top, or is put at the top by somebody else. So yeah, anything's possible with these people. And God, all the ideas, all the memes being put out there for the sheep to consume, like stuff that Bill Gates puts out there. I mean, increasingly he impresses me as a genuinely evil person.
Yeah.
With this pastel colored cashmere sweaters and all that. Really just totally hateful. So yeah, I think they actually hate people. They say, oh, we love the environment. They don't love the environment. They actually hate other people.
Yep.
So it's very dangerous because the state and people like that have gotten into a position of power, and the average sheep out there, the average chimpanzee out there thinks he needs them and that they're doing the right thing and they're well-intentioned. So it makes me pretty gloomy when I look at that. I mean, what do you think?
I definitely think that it's clear that they aren't trying to avoid World War III. So whether they actually want World War III to happen, I can't say for sure, but they're either not worried about it or they want it to happen because they're not engaging in anything that would make me think that they are trying to avoid it, that they're trying to make sure it doesn't occur. So whatever their motivation is, whether it's to, they actually want to reduce the population, I don't know. I definitely think they hate you. I think they hate us. I think they hate normal people. I think they have just total disdain for anyone other than their clique or their circle. And it seems to me that they are acting as though they want World War III to happen, whatever that might mean. They're acting like it.
Yeah, so at best, to use Barbara Tuchman's phrase, they're sleepwalking towards World War III.
Which she used that describing what happened in World War I, if I recall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. What do you think will happen to the EU and Europe? Is there any hope at all for Europe?
God, I wish there was. I like Europe so much. Or let's say I like the idea of Europe so much.
Important distinction.
Yeah, but I'm afraid that culture and civilization in Europe has really degraded over the years, and the values of Europe have been washed away. So it's a dead duck from that point of view, I think. Chances of a renaissance, slim and none, and Slim's out of town. And there's going to be a new Slim in town. There's going to be scores of millions of migrants coming up from Africa and from the Middle East, because Europe's a neat place to be. it's better than living on a pile of sand with other desperately poor people. They're all going to get on a boat and come to Europe, and you can't stop them. Well, at least you could stop them, and you should stop them when it comes to that. But the Europeans are too, they won't. And then what's left over, the Chinese will pick the bones, because there'll still be some nice buildings standing. So
Yeah, you've been calling for this mass migration from Africa and the Middle East for a long time. I remember, and obviously it has been happening. But you can see on the precipice of this food crisis that could be the catalyst that really unleashes, legions of them moving north.
yes, it could be, and of course it's happening in the U.S. too. Because if I was a poor Central American, hell, I'm walking across the Rio Grande tomorrow morning.
Yep.
Because, automatically they're going to feed me, clothe me, give me 3 hots and a cot. I mean, at least.
And a cell phone.
And a cell phone and some walking around money. And I guess the figures show that it's not just people from Central America that are showing up. It's from all over the world, because it's the easiest way to get into the US, the best way by far. Forget about expensive immigration lawyers, which none of them can afford, and it takes forever. No, so we're gonna have millions of people migrating to the US and millions to Europe. It's gonna be quite chaotic, because after a while, the natives aren't going to get along with the new migrants quite as well as we'd all like them to be in a Disney movie.
Right. One other thing about Europe, I remember you saying something along the lines, maybe it must have been like 15 years ago, I saw this, or you say this, is that you said something along the lines of the history of Europe is one giant blood stain, or something like that. Like the map of Europe is just a giant blood stain of wars and trouble, and hard to imagine it shifts from that.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, yeah, Europeans have really proved to be really good at wars. I mean, I guess human beings are pretty good at wars. I mean, all of these cultures all around the world, they're constantly fighting each other, but Europeans are better at it than other people, I think.
Yeah, certainly been very active. What do you think a reset of the financial system will look like? What will happen to debt? How will debt be repriced to a new currency? And what effect might that have on precious metals?
Well, of course, the digital currency is a total and utter disaster, and it's going to be tied up by the state with all these other horrible things that they're doing, like, health passports, which will turn out to be like a UN passport, which will kind of overrule national passports. And God. And of course, this is the big one. When you have digital currencies where your accounts with the central bank, you are well and truly fucked. You really are. It's all over. Keep your gold and silver coins, and keep them in a safe and private place
that you have access to personally.
No, that's right. This will all blow up eventually, and you want some capital for when, or maybe your kids, or maybe your grandkids.
It might be a while.
Although why should you care about your grandkids unless you know them personally? Because you're just going to be a photograph on the wall to them. Oh, thanks.
At best.
Yeah.
At best. Yeah. Okay. So this person is apparently having a dispute with their partner or spouse. They say, how would you help your partner understand the gravity of geopolitics and macroeconomics today?
Actually, I think that's the wrong question, because you shouldn't have chosen somebody that you can have those kind of arguments with. I mean, I'm sure that your spouse has many favorable qualities. He's probably smart and good looking, and et cetera, et cetera. That's all great. But it is a tragic error that most people don't think about, because most people don't think about philosophical issues. that you mate with somebody that it has nothing to do with how you see the world, your basic Weltanschauung. So this may be an insoluble problem. I'm not sure you can convince them. I give you a list of books. Will they read the books? If they read the books, will they just say this is bullshit or resent it? And, well, you can try. You can reason with them. But if you can't reason with them and they still have these bad ideas, you know what you ought to do? Fido.
Fuck it, drive
Everybody knows
on.
what Fido means, I presume.
Fuck it, drive on.
That's right.
That's good advice. Yeah, there's too many battles to fight in life than to fight some fundamental ones with your partner.
Yeah, you don't need one more aggravation in life, especially on the home front.
Right.
I mean, if you can have aggravation, it should be out there,
Out there.
away, not at home.
Agreed. Okay. Can you give me an update on the question of where does one go in 2022? Like in the last couple of months, seeing what's the trends that are going on globally. Obviously, we're currently both here in Uruguay. Is there anywhere else? Is there anywhere that you think, any revised opinion about where one might go to be as comfortable and free as possible in the coming decade?
A lot of it depends on how much money you have. Because if you've got adequate funds, you can go anywhere for the time being and have a great time. So more than where to go, the question is, how much money do you have to go someplace? That'll make all the difference, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Okay, but as far as a place to go, well, a lot of these things are pretty local, unless they turn a country into a real police state like Venezuela, for instance. I mean, there's a tragedy, you know, or Colombia, which, you know, might be going back into their perpetual guerrilla war again. I mean, doesn't seem out of the question. So it seems like the southern cone of South America, from southern Brazil to and points south, probably the best place in this hemisphere. But you know, you can be there are places in Canada and the U.S. if you like your neighbors, they'll be okay.
Yep. I think that's a big key. It all comes down to local at the end of the day.
Local.
Who are you surrounded with? What's the quality of life there? What resources do you have access to? I mean, yeah. So
Good reason not to be in a big city during times of chaos for many, many reasons. And that's one of them, because, you know, even in a few neighbors, you're gonna be totally overwhelmed by the mobs. So.
That's right. Well, I don't know if you've seen some of the videos of the crime that's going on in Chicago lately. Like, it's just so out of control. Chicago is, you know, shootings have been way up there. We're just thinking about the big city that I grew up close to and that you grew up close to. It's just such a seemingly dangerous place at this point, like legitimately dangerous and not a good place to be. And it's totally out of control. I mean, they can't, you know, they have the mayor coming out who's totally incompetent and in many ways coming out and like changing the curfew to try and keep young people so they can't stay out later. But like, because they're going out in packs of hundreds of kids and they're just mobbing whatever they want. And they really can't be stopped. I mean, unless you're going to start, I mean, I don't know how you begin to tackle that problem from a law enforcement standpoint. So the cities, as they get, as the basic norms of society continue to degrade, the lawlessness is going to grow, and suffering increases as food prices go up and inflation increases. It's going to get crazy. I would not want to be in a city.
You're right. I mean, we could have, you know, right under our very eyes, we could have warlords could arise in the United States in the form of these urban gangs. There was a really good movie that came out, I don't know, it must have been about 1980, called The Warriors. Did you see that one?
No, I never did.
Oh, it's a great movie. It's about all the gangs of New York back in the days when, you know, New York was actually a very dangerous place. And this kind of ultimate gang leader gets all of the Crips and the Bloods and 100 other gangs, and they decide we're going to take over the city. And what happens? And of course, somebody kills them, so that plan falls apart. But it's about this one gang having to make it from Coney Island to anyway. It's a great watch. So put that on your list. The
And that could
Warriors.
happen. Something like that could happen. You could definitely see that. I mean, we know there's, I know in countries like in Sweden, I have a friend who's a Swedish friend here in Uruguay, and there are real no-go zones all over around the major cities in Sweden where the cops just don't go. They stay out of there. They've just abandoned them. And you'd have to imagine that I know that's the case for sure in some neighborhoods in Baltimore where the cops just stay out of those neighborhoods now. And all you have to do is have a little territorial expansion, and the cops just got to be like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for them to go there.
Yeah, they tried that out. Where was that, in Seattle, where they
The Chaz or whatever.
right.
Yeah.
But this would be much more serious because those were just stupid hippie yuppies, playing a game. But a serious gang that's well organized they might pull it off. I mean, like an ultra mafia. I mean, much more serious than the mafia. Yeah, sure, it could happen. Because it'd be, among other things, be racially based and ethnically based, so they can. I think that's in the cards. Big cities.
Happen. Well, related to that, Doug, do you see feudalism making a comeback?
Yeah, it was a stupid system, destructive system. Any political system is, but at least the state was more localized. God. But the thing is that people really believe once you institute a system, well, that's the way it ought to be. And then whatever the religious doctrine is, backs it up and says, well, God's on top, so the Lord ought to be on top. And then he ought to have feudal lords under him, guarding all the sheep for our own interest. So, we could have a kind of neo-feudalism that arises, of course.
What do you think of Caribbean countries as hideout places?
They're not very, to use that corrupted and overused word, sustainable, I don't think.
Yeah.
Those Caribbean countries used to live on sugar. That's what they were. That's what all the Africans came there for, to harvest sugar. But now sugar is not such a big deal. It's not economic really anywhere. So tourism, they live on tourism, basically, I guess. And, they're, especially in today's world, if you're a white person or an Oriental, and these people are all blacks, well, it could be a problem. I mean, things go bad, they might all decide, wait a minute, it's that guy's fault,
Exactly.
I don't know, I really like the Caribbean, but I'm not sure from that point of view it's that great.
Well, they seem to be so fundamentally dependent on imports from mainland, from even for basic things, basic food, and most of them are dependent upon importing food. Yeah,
they produce absolutely nothing. I mean, really. I mean, this would be an interesting study to see exactly what's produced on these Caribbean islands. Well, they still got sugar. So most of them make rum. Okay, that's fine. But there's not a lot of production of any type there. Nobody sets up a factory because it's just too costly for so many reasons. Not least of which is their local state. Any of those Caribbean countries could become the next Hong Kong, because Hong Kong had nothing, just ignorant and poor Chinese peasants became one of the 2 or 3 richest places in the world. So any of these Caribbean places could do that. Will they? No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Doug, what do you? Is there anything that you're in a philosophical disagreement with either libertarians or ANCAPs? Is there anything that you tend to? On libertarians, it's probably easier because of course there'd be some differences because you're more of an ANCAP. But is there some philosophical disagreement that you have at all with people who tend to be libertarians or ANCAPs?
Well, I think the main stumbling block may be with ANCAPs. There's really no philosophical differences at all. It's
Yeah.
really a tightly woven group. But I think that maybe a fault line could be where you draw the line with the non-aggression principle. In other words, you're not supposed to start a conflict. Okay, but I live in a state and these people I'm already under attack. So, if I want to reach out, and of course, if you do that, then you're called a terrorist. So it's where you draw the line as for self-defense against the state, essentially.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and where violence fits into this, assuming it does. Can't talk about this stuff because it can be held against you later in a court of law.
Yeah. Or
increasingly turning into kangaroo courts. Anyway,
I was going to say, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't actually think of the non-aggression principle really applying to the state. I thought it only applied to, I only thought of it as in dealing with other individuals.
Works pretty well with other individuals.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with organizations, then it becomes a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah.
Because then the organization is just a bunch of people. So then you got, well, to what degree is this operative of the state? Are you going to punish him individually? Well, hey, I was just driving the train to Auschwitz or whatever. But I know you let them take an inch, they'll take a mile.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the trouble with organizations, is that all these people, a lot of cultural conservatives in the US think, well, the police and the army are on our side because they're just, normal middle-class guys and they generally have the right values. Okay, that's true about the guys in the trenches anyway. I think it is true. But on the other hand, the reason that they're in the trenches is because they need that paycheck. And they're used to taking orders from the guys above them. And that's a bad combination. Even if they don't like what they're doing, they'll probably do it. So I don't know, where do you draw the line? That's the problem with the only point of disagreement between ANCAPs is where do you draw the line?
That makes sense. What do you think will come first, World War III or the breaking up of various countries into smaller pieces?
Well, they'll certainly be contemporaneous, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of countries have broken up just in recent times, all peacefully. Well, with the exception of Kosovo, where the US fomented this war, this secession movement. It was funny, Kosovo is a good secession movement, but Donbass is a bad secession movement.
Exactly.
And of course, these chimpanzees out there don't even know about this. And anyway.
No. And I sent you that video of George W. Bush when his Freudian slip. Did you watch that?
That was funny. What he said? He said, yeah, some psychopath launches an attack on
a defenseless, like an illegal, unjust attack on an innocent country, but he said Iraq.
Iraq is what
Ukraine.
he said,
and he meant to say Ukraine, and then he realized he goes, oh, Iraq,
Yeah.
And then he said I'm 75, and he kind of blamed it on being old, I guess. But
yeah, well, just because he's 75, because I am too, doesn't mean that he shouldn't be hung by a lamppost by his heels, which he should.
Exactly right. I mean, the Freudian slips are beautiful things when they happen, especially that one. That was, man, as good as they come, I think.
That really was. That was great.
I loved it. Okay, next question here. If the goal is being independent from the state, Which of these two paths would Doug choose in today's context? A, being an international man, having different citizenships, residency in multiple countries, the business in one country, investments in yet another country, and permanently being on the move. Or B, having an off grid, self sustaining property somewhere in a remote place in a weak but safe country.
I think the answer is check C, both of the above. That's the answer. It's like, look, even Superman, who could go anywhere, had his fortress of solitude.
Yes.
So I think it makes sense to have a base someplace, kind of a retreat. But in the meanwhile, make the world your oyster. So you can and should do both. And if you feel like you can't do both, well, that means that you've got to figure out a way to get more money so you can.
Doug, do you believe that you've done better success-wise? I don't know if I should ask this question. I know how you're going to answer, so it's okay. Doug, do you believe you would have done better success-wise having a wife, or could you have done more or less as a bachelor your whole life?
Well, that's interesting, because I think this is a question that we could only ask, even reasonably, in the last 100 years. Because before then, you needed a wife because you had to go out and work all day. Who's going to, take care of the house? Well, if you're really successful, then you can hire maids and cooks and all that. Yeah, that'll work. But I don't know. Everybody likes a trusted companion, and it's somebody of the opposite sex. It's so I guess the answer to the question is that look, I didn't get married or let's say permanently move in with somebody, and we didn't get married until I was 39. So there's no hurry to do any of this that I can tell. I mean, why should you get, yes, I know you want to start a family early so you can have grandchildren gathered around you, but no guarantees that your grandchildren will be anything but a nuisance or that they'll be any damn good at all. I mean, you might pick some real winners. I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
But, I think in today's world, a male shouldn't even think of getting married before he's about 40, probably. Exceptions, of course. But, and I don't know what a female should do. You've got a different biological setup. But of course, all this is being denied now.
Yeah.
Everybody's very confused. So that's what I suggest, though. I don't think if you're going to get married, and you probably should, because there's a lot of economic advantages to it if you choose the right person, which nobody does. People only choose somebody because, oh, you fall in love. But let me tell you, you fall out of love too. That happens. So it's everybody suffers from these little psychological aberrations where they make mistakes, and you choose the wrong person by getting married. That is one way to really fuck up your finances, because it's like an overnight bear market that takes at least half.
Mm-hmm. And can break you psychologically, especially if there's kids involved. I mean, it could just being run through the gutter for years sometimes.
Makes it much harder to recover at that point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The one thing
you got to be really careful, I think.
Have you ever known anyone who was in an arranged marriage?
An arranged marriage. I'm trying to think, and I guess personally, I think not.
I've only known one. It was an Indian guy, and is a physician, and he was telling me his story. He's probably 15 years older than me. He was telling me a story, and he'd been married to his wife at that point for like 30 years, and they had a great family that they loved, and he had only really positive things to say about her. And I'm like, well, people would and I asked him how he met her, and he told me that it was arranged. That it was arranged. He met her only after the decision had been made that he was going to marry her, and not by him or her. And it's at least in that one case, it worked out extremely well. Both of their points of view on it, they were very happy together. You know, and they and I almost wonder the people around you. Of course, I know you wouldn't like this idea conceptually of people making these major decisions in life for you, but there is some nice kind of break in a way where people who understand, who have a wiser view of the long-term nature of these relationships, have some actual input, on the relationship. And I only have one example. I'm sure many people have lots of counter examples to that, but it was surprising hearing him explain it. It totally changed my view of it. I thought at first it would be just a terrible thing, but the way he explained it, I go, sounds interesting, actually.
I guess it could make sense, although from a personal
Freedom standpoints.
I don't like it in principle, but I can certainly see the potential wisdom of it in many circumstances. And this whole thing about arranged marriages, I mean, being a concubine was, a very honorable position for a female because, it's the pecking order. This is the wife. And for other needs that somebody might have, perhaps intellectual companionship, perhaps good sex, perhaps God knows what, you have girlfriends. I mean, so that can work within that context. I mean, as long as it's all voluntary, I don't have any problem with any of it.
Nope. Yeah, me either. Okay, let's see. What is your general position on firearms and personal protection?
Well, happiness is a warm gun. I love firearms, and I've done a lot of shooting in my life, and they're great. Everybody ought to have one. And from a philosophical point of view, it's very important because throughout history, one of the main distinctions between a free man and a slave was the right to defend yourself and be armed. And if you couldn't be armed, you were a slave, or you were looked down on as if you could be one, or maybe should be a slave. So everybody should have plenty of guns. And not just guns, but one of my favorite characters in all of literature is Al Swearingen, and
Of course.
from Deadwood. And Al liked to use cutlery.
It's like the knife. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I understand those are illegal in England now. It
Yeah,
happened for
yeah.
years.
Yeah. I don't know how they do that exactly, but yes, they're dangerous apparently. So
Yeah, you can cut yourself, I guess.
yeah. So I saw this big street fight with a bunch of people who were using in England who were using cricket bats.
Wow.
Yeah, there was like probably 30 guys involved in this fight, and they all had cricket bats.
So yeah.
Yes, so they'll have to make those illegal soon, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, it is said, this is how karate developed in Okinawa, is that the Okinawans were not allowed any means of self-defense, so they developed karate. So that was very good. And of course, a simple walking staff. There are martial arts that are developed with simple walking staffs that are really effective in deadly weapons.
Yeah.
So
be armed, be dangerous. That's the important thing.
Exactly.
Do you think what do you think of getting a second passport in the Caribbean, such as St. Kitts or Grenada, sorry.
I think it's a paradox. On the one hand, it's more important than ever to have a second passport so that your only ID just isn't the one that your own government, which is your main enemy in life, owns. So yeah, you should have one, and nothing wrong with those passports. They're, pretty good travel documents. I mean, most of those countries, you buy the passport, and, it's visa-free travel to 125, 130 or 40 countries. That's pretty good, including the EU. So that's good. But on the other hand, I think what the next step, like we talked about before, is there's going to be a World Health Organization passport that's going to be like the de facto UN passport. So
Yep.
yeah, but get one, get another one regardless. I mean,
Yeah, might buy you 2 years of of extra freedom, but eventually that's coming. The one
yeah.
world passport, no doubt. Okay, Doug, do you want Trump to retake the presidency in 2024?
I wrote an article back in 2012 that I still stand by today, diagnosing Trump. And the problem with Trump is that he's a cultural conservative. That's great. But, his idea of being a cultural conservative is, 1950s family and all that's great. I mean, I think it's wonderful. But, he really is a narcissist. And the problem is he has absolutely no philosophical core, totally flies by the seat of his pants, and he's an opportunist. So that, no, I think, look, it's wonderful that the average salt of the earth guy has somebody to kind of gather around and, have as a champion. But he's not really a very good champion. But
Yeah.
you're not going to get a good champion because, you know, uh, good people tend to have something better to do with their time than hang out with the kind of scumbags that get into high levels of politics. So, better than Biden? Oh yeah, vastly better. But I hate making these. These are called Hobson's choices. I hate. Okay, who are you going to vote for? Stalin or Hitler? I guess I'd vote for Hitler because he was actually much less dangerous than Stalin, unless you were a Jew.
Yeah. All right. Doug, with the current state of education in the United States, if you were charged with homeschooling a young child and custom tailoring their education, how would you go about this task?
Well, of course, Matt, you and I have talked about writing a book about exactly this, the Renaissance man, exactly what should be made available to the young person at different stages of his life. And what kind of counsel should you give somebody? Although I'm not sure giving counsel to anybody does any good, because we talked about Marcus Aurelius and Commodus, but
Right.
that's not the only example. A more famous example that most people don't think about is Nero and Seneca, another great Stoic philosopher. And Seneca was brought up Nero, didn't do any good at all. You can't make a sow's ear into a silk purse. And, Aristotle and Alexander the Great. There's another example. I mean, sure, Alexander had a lot of, incredible character traits. He was basically a criminal psychopath. So, did it do any good that Aristotle was?
Who knows what it would have been like without him, though?
Well, that's right. Alternate history. It's a lot of fun to think about. So
Yeah.
I guess all's well that ends well, and
Yeah.
no point in whining about spilled milk.
So basically, were you thinking about the things that young people would need to be exposed to have experiences they need to have? Would you look for, like how would you organize what they needed to read or what they needed? Like, I guess in the vast swath of education, most of what you and I personally talked about is in the later stages when basically people are at, 16 years and up, through kind of university age. But what about early on, starting to think about the education of a young man or woman, a young boy or girl? I guess what resources would you tap? Books or people or what to try and get them exposed to the things you'd want them to have?
Yeah, I'd certainly try to keep them out of the public school system for sure. But if you I guess the best thing is to make it possible to for them to learn not by reading but by doing.
Yes.
So put them in an environment and expose them to people that can show them and demonstrate to them the right ideas and you know techniques of living and everything else. But that's kind of a full-time job if you're going to bring up a kid really properly. I think I would have been a terrible parent because I'm more interested in doing what I want to do as opposed to being responsible and bringing up the kid. I mean, I tried to do the best I could, but it's a real problem.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the nature nurture argument we had before. I think that assuming that you would have to, assuming that you're making it a full-time job to shape them, it would almost be giving too much credit to nurture, right? I don't think nurture would even work. But I think it's mostly about making sure you're not polluting their mind with awful ideas, than it is to make sure that that you're prioritizing, constantly inputting good ideas into them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. And if you try to shape somebody too overtly, they're just going to resent it later. Like
Exactly.
there was a guy I met a few years ago that when that book by the Chinese lady, Tiger Mom, was out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this guy had the idea, well, that's a good idea, but what you really need is a lion dad. Wanted to be rich and famous by doing this kind of writing books like this. And he was trying to, and I liked his son a lot. And, but you could see how annoyed the son was with the father because he was like being used as a lab experiment by his
Right.
father, and directed, and it was
Yeah, the problem with all that, both the Tiger Mom and the Lion Dad, is basically that it's about the dad and the mom. It's not about the kid, actually. It's like they're trying to, the parents are trying to work out their own problems through their kids. I mean, it's almost like a perverse, it's a different version of Munchausen by proxy in a way. You know what I mean? You're
that's
getting,
right.
it's not healthy. Not
Yeah, that's
healthy.
right. In fact, there's an argument that can be made for maybe the best thing is to have your kids brought up by wolves for the first couple of years of their life.
Yes, exactly. Give them a fighting chance, free of their parents' psychological aberrations.
Right.
So, Doug, someone wants to know if you have Rolling Stone Street Fighting Man queued up and ready to go. It seems like the days are coming when it needs to be played.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely my favorite Rolling Stones song, although I have a bunch of them. Although a lot of them you certainly don't hear in public anymore because they're very non-PC, like Under My Thumb and
Yeah.
Brown Sugar. Can't play those in public anymore, I guess. But yeah, absolutely. You can expect Street Fighting Man is going to be the theme song. And
It is.
I draw I draw everybody's attention to the movie V for Vendetta, where it was the theme song.
Yep. Doug, what are your views on the WHO Pandemic Preparedness Treaty?
I guess we've already talked about this. Are they voting on this like now or something?
I believe it's next week is when they're getting together, or maybe it is this week in Geneva, but it's
God,
coming up here. Yeah.
God, this is potentially disastrous. This is a major wedge that the bad guys are.
And
Yeah, it's
there's no way to get, because I mean, people have asked me, well, Uruguay is a signer to it, and they are, along with every other country, basically that's a participant in the WHO. They're kind of by default added to it. So the
yeah,
strange nature of this problem is that there isn't anywhere you can go to be totally unaffected by it. The question, I guess, would be, what are the enforcement abilities of the state that you happen to be in?
yeah. Well, that's an argument for living in a small and backward place in relative terms where they don't have the apparatus, the state apparatus to be efficient that way. Um, this is really horrible. And it's funny. I was listening to just because out here on the farm, you've got to reach out on the internet, and I want to know what's going on with the hoi polloi back in the U.S. So I like to listen to Tucker Carlson because he's generally on the right side of issues, but he's such a muppet. He's such a nebbish. I mean, like he says, well, we can't have this because whoever that Marxist Ethiopian is that runs he's
Tedros.
not elected. I said, fucking idiot. Who do you think? How do you think Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and all these people, they're all elected. It doesn't make any difference if you're
Exactly.
elected. Cool. But he makes that like a major point, pandering to the idiots in his audience. Not that all of his audience are idiots, because he often gives good speeches.
He does. He does, and he's sounding the alarm better than anyone else is in the mainstream. That's for sure about all of these things. So he is willing to say things that seem that that other people are not willing to say. But you're right. He does. He takes some of the basic talking points of the status on and goes, okay, because all of our excuses for all of our foreign adventures is all about spreading democracy, right? So that's the label that people use. Democracy is the new religion. Democracy is everything. Democracy and equity, actually, those two things are everything. And when he picks them up and he runs with it, also it is it's a little offensive, that he does that. But he makes it clear that, and I saw that segment that he did. I saw it this morning where he was talking about it and saying like how big of a deal it was, and essentially you're trading your national sovereignty for this treaty. Now we've been doing this for decades, though, and undermining all kinds of state level powers. But this one just seems to be the most. It's easiest for us to imagine what it might mean just coming off this COVID stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So Tucker Carlson does serve a very good purpose.
Yeah.
He's not perfect, but he's so much better than Jesse Waters, who actually does have a lukewarm IQ, and Sean Hannity.
I hate him. I cannot. I kind of like. Yeah, he kind of makes me like if I hear his voice, like my agitation rises. I really do not like that man.
No, I actively dislike him. But then again, if you're going to be watching television, then what are you left with? MSNBC and CNN, where these people are universally, they're all just.
I think I'll just watch Jeff Berwick's latest video instead.
Yeah, that's true.
It's some entertainment.
Incidentally, in Jeff's last video, and I lost this long story. Maybe you can send me that one. How did he bought billions of that coin that fell out of bed?
Luna.
What did he do?
He bought it at basically the exchange was only set up so that it could collapse so far. Like it couldn't go to zero, but it could go down to basically, I don't know, it's like 1/10,000th of a dollar, I guess. And so, but the exchange was not actually set up for it to go any lower than that. Mm-hmm. So all these people were trying to dump it, and they couldn't even place sell orders lower than that amount. And so he figured that out, and he was then buying basically at that literal bottom limit that was available to buy at. And he was buying as much as he possibly could, and it was limited based upon how, you can only buy up to 9 million coins per transaction, which ended up being like, I think he said it was like $10 for every transaction, because they're so low. And so he bought a bunch of them, and then, the price did bounce from there, and he sold a bunch. I don't know how many he sold exactly and what his position is at now, but it definitely shows like there's sometimes just weird market features, I guess, just the mechanics that you can trade into, but you got to be very on top of it. And obviously he was very on top of it to be able to catch that.
Good for him. That's fantastic. Oh, yeah. But I think
you like to see people win.
Isn't it true that out of the 18,000 or however many tokens that are out there trading, you got to believe most of them are going to go to zero. Most of them are now worth hundreds of millions or billions.
I think so. I think so. So, and actually, someone asked that question here, Doug, a related question. Someone said, "How do you deal with a major financial loss?" I think that somebody was probably involved in Luna and probably lost quite a bit of money this last week, and so that was one of their questions for you. How do you deal with a major financial loss?
Well, once again, tip of the hat to Jeff Berwick on that.
Yeah, for sure.
But how do I deal with it? Well, it took me a long time to actually burn this into my psyche. But Harry Schultz, who I guess a lot of people have forgotten about, but he was one of the grandfathers of the newsletter business back when newsletters, it was an honest occupation. You sold a good product at a reasonable price. It's no longer the case.
No.
For most newsletters, I've got to say. But anyway, Harry always said, "I'm often wrong, but never for more than 24 hours." And well, okay, that's a good quip and easier said than done, but it's a really good thing to keep in mind. Because you know what? If you can always buy the position back and decide, so you can be wrong lots. You just try to stay on the right side of things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
people always, I mean, it's like a natural human psychological trait that, you can examine. It's that they love their investments. They like their investments. They want to be proven right. But, but that's very foolish. Don't love anything that won't love you back. And there's nothing to prove in the market. The only thing to prove is will you win or lose in the end. I mean, the investment doesn't care. You're not going to be telling Star Spangled War stories at a cocktail party about, how you toughed it out. And no, if it's going the wrong way, sell the goddamn thing and then look at it in a new unit of time and see if you really want to buy it back.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I deal with it.
Yeah, and you gotta. I mean, there are a lot of people that were holding on to huge crypto gains, and and big gains in tech stocks too recently,
Yeah.
and never sold. And I think that's also one of those things. I mean, you gotta, especially when you see when something's done so well for a long time. I mean, you got to take some money off the table. I know you had your free ride formula, right? If you doubled your money, then you take your original investment off the table, so that now at least your downside was eliminated and you could still participate in the upside. That was one technique that you popularized.
That's right. And but that implies that you've got to have some better place to put it. But sometimes a better place to put it is just in dollars. Even if they're losing value at 10 or 15% per year, better 15% per year than 50% in 2 days.
Yes.
So,
right.
but that's what's going on in the world at large today. There's no place to hide that in a depression, everybody loses. The general standard of living drops. Less services available, less goods available, lots of real wealth, but doesn't quite have the utility that once did. I mean, like Lamborghinis. As you know, I'm not a fan of Lamborghinis, except for the very first ones, which were something different. But so all these people with Lambos in their garages now, they're not going to be able to afford the mechanics. They don't want to drive them on the streets because they're going to get keyed and worse as a rich guy. So I promise you that 10 years from now, you'll be buying Lambos the way you could buy Duesenbergs with dead batteries and birds nesting in them. The way it was with doozies in the 30s. Same thing.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
40s. Okay.
Well, and I mean, you look at the sentiment that drove the people in Sri Lanka to set all the luxury cars on fire owned by the upper class there. That same sentiment could easily trickle down to every country in the world if life becomes difficult, and driving a high profile car around like that at all could be a gigantic liability.
Exactly. And in South American countries, especially places like Colombia and Venezuela and parts of Brazil, you don't drive a ritzy car. It's like saying, target, target.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm the one you're looking for. Yeah,
Well, I think
exactly.
there's gonna be a lot of changes. People forget that in these unstable parts of the world that don't have the values of Western civilization, you know, people have wonderful houses, but they're not display pieces set on the hill. We can do that in the West with Western values, but they're behind shabby looking walls with big
Yes,
steel doors. And then it's elegant thing, but you want to look nothing on the outside.
right. Throwing it in their faces is
Yeah,
probably not a good move. Throwing it in
no,
people's
no, it's
faces,
not.
your wealth. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
and as Western civilization collapses, that's going to become more important to observe the way the benighted people in the third world have survived.
Yes. Okay. Just two more questions, Doug. What do you think the next couple of countries or dominoes to fall? In the way that Sri Lanka went. Do you have any thought about what the next couple of countries might be that might go through that?
Well, I got to bet on Haiti. That's
Mm,
one. It's an island. Uh, I don't think the Haitians are going to be able to overwhelm the Dominican border because they don't get along very well. And you can tell a Haitian from a Dominican first by the language. That's always the giveaway. But there's a lot of black Dominicans, but the Haitians are gonna be coming across barefoot and that. So I think Haiti could collapse completely and totally. And
mm,
I think the next thing is going to be boat people somehow getting from Haiti to Florida.
mm,
You
mm.
know, the Bahamas, most people are unaware of this. The Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos are, are basically populated by Haitians at this point. They land on a beach. Okay. Okay, there they are. So then they try to survive, rent themselves out to do whatever and build capital and all that. So same thing's going to happen with Haiti and Florida. I think that's going to be the next
Mm,
big crisis that you'll see talked about, with
mm.
all the scaredy cats on the news. So that's one. I don't know what another one would be. Islands can be really good things or really bad things, depending on the obvious factors.
Interesting.
Can
Did
you
you know
think about?
there's
Think
one
of
other
it?
one?
Yeah.
Well, there's this viewer we have who I text back and forth with, and he manages a couple $1 billion. He's a hedge fund manager, manages a couple $1 billion, and he's really looks at the CDS market a lot. And I don't know if you've looked at that very much. I certainly hadn't.
No. CDS
Just
market. What is that?
the CDS market, the basically the insurance on the sovereign on the debt of the country.
Oh, insurance on the debt of a country.
Yeah.
Is that an actual market? I didn't know.
Yes, CDS is what it is. I don't know. It's collateral debt securities, I think. Is that what it stands for? Something like that.
Oh,
Um,
is this is this something like with these reverse what they did during the housing crisis with
yeah, well, that was
mortgage
mortgage-backed securities. So, but
and
this is it's
credit
just all
agreements?
it's all insurance basically on sovereign debt is the way I understand it. It's like it's insurance against default of sovereign debt.
Hmm.
So it's one of those derivatives that's out there. But he was looking at it and showing me how that traded with Sri Lanka, and it was pretty extraordinary. I mean, you see it just totally explode higher, as we were getting close to the point where things were falling apart. So the market was ahead of it. The CDS market was definitely ahead of it. And he showed me yesterday that the the CDS market for Nigeria, it doubled in the day. And he
Interesting.
said it was I want to get the number right. It was let me just look at his text here. Sure, I'll tell you. It was a 72 sigma event.
Wow.
Like 72 standard deviation event. He said like once in a billion years
Hmm.
that would happen. And he said it wasn't their total rate that they were going for, but the speed of change was just totally out of proportion. At the same day, Lithuania was 8 standard deviations moving up.
Oh,
And so he's like, it's just, you see this like contagion sort of spreading, see this sort of systemic risk spreading throughout, the insurance on all sovereign debt. And I'm learning a little bit about it only from him, but it's pretty fascinating.
that's interesting because that's certainly a market that I'm not familiar with and therefore have not followed. But I think that's quite interesting because all of these governments around the world are corrupt and stupid and over indebted and destructive. So yeah, they should collapse and their debt should be defaulted on. Because I've long said, well, so how do you change things in the US? How do you make it better in the US? Now, one of the ways, I can give you a list of other things. None of them are going to be very popular. You should default on the national debt. I mean, it's better to have a controlled demolition and do it honestly, because I don't want to reward these people that have been codependent with the US government. To hell with them. Default on it. The banks will fail. Yeah, I guess they will, but they're going to fail anyway. So
Right.
yeah, it's a good bet. I remain short US government bonds, but at the moment they're going a little bit against me, but I'm not too worried because selling naked calls, the premium is always evaporating. So usually worst case, it's a break even or a small loss. And usually I just capture my premium, but that's kind of like a CDS bet being short US government bonds, long
Hmm.
bonds.
Wait, actually, so I was wrong about the country. It was the Moroccan sovereign debt that increased by 7 standard deviations. That's what it's the
Moroccan.
Moroccan. Yep, Moroccan.
Yeah,
Yep.
well, listen, I'm all for riding the Marrakesh Express, but
But see,
yeah,
these are pretty interesting. I'll share this screen capture you sent me. But it's 8 standard deviation change for Lithuania, 5.2 standard deviation change for Croatia, Algeria 4.4. I mean, it's just the numbers are just exploding in the wrong direction. So I think that's really interesting.
sure, there's going to be a bunch more. And let me go on record making a bet. Believe it or not, there's a country called Bosnia and Herzegovina, a very obscure country that somehow survived the breakup of Yugoslavia, but they have all the problems that caused the breakup of Yugoslavia. They've got the Christian Orthodox Muslim split and the rest of it. So there's a candidate for civil war. I don't know how
Hmm.
you really take advantage of it, but just to mention, it'll further Americans' education and geography.
Right, which is
Wars war is nature's way of teaching Americans geography. We'll find
that's
a way to get
the
it, I'm sure.
it's one of my favorite lines ever. That's a great one. Okay, all right. Well, I think we'll leave it there then for today, Doug. We've gone kind of long today, so but that was really great. Thank you very much for doing it. I appreciate
Yeah, a
it.
lot of fun. Nice way to end up the week, Matt.
Yeah, excellent.